gonna just go around and have them introduce themselves. And so we'll start with Cristina, then Justin, Femi, and then we'll go back to Dr. Chantal Line. So let's go with Cristina Ackas, if you don't mind.
And just for the sake of time, I will make this very quick. I'm Cristina Ackas. I currently serve as the VP for Inclusive Diversity for the Octagon Sports and Entertainment Network. We are actually a network of about 5 global agencies focusing on everything from PR, entertainment, talent, and athlete representation, as well as sports marketing.
Thank you so much. Great. Justin.
Hi, everyone. My name is Justin Phalichanh. I head up talent development at product enablement at Kinesso and Matterkind, which is a part of the IPG Interpublic Holding Group. What that actually translates to day to day is I help our people learn about themselves and then also learn about our products and services. So my team and I were responsible for the L&D space. So happy to be here.
Great, happy to have you here. And also want to mention that you're one of our sponsors, your firm's one of our sponsors for today. So I want to give also a virtual clap to definitely supporting our cause here. So thank you. Okay, let's go with Dr. Femi Olu-Lafe. I hope I said that correctly.
That was good. Thank you, Oscar.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. I am Femi. Happy to be here today. I look after culture and inclusion for Axiom, Kinesso, and Matterkind. So basically, I'm in charge of leading up our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. Before this, I spent some time in an organization called Catalyst, which is all about workplaces that work for women, working for everyone. So this subject is very, very dear to my heart. So I'm happy that Dr. Layling, you created some space for us to talk about it today. You're on mute, Oscar.
Great, nicely done. And again, thank you. And again, no introduction already. We had an incredible keynote already. So I'm going to start out with the first question is, and we'll start with Dr. Chantal Line, if you don't mind opening your mic. And then we're going to go back to Cristina and then Justin, and then back to you, Femi, on this question on what surprised you the most about the Great Resignation. We had the global pandemic lockdown. And I'll go to you first, and then we'll go to Cristina, and then Justin, and Femi. So, first question: what surprised you about this phenomenon?
Well, it's not the same everywhere. So it means that policy matters, right? And this is why I said in my introductory remark that I'd be curious to see what's happening everywhere else. We talk about Great Resignation here in the U.S. In Canada, or in Quebec at least, it's been mostly women in their 50s that have not come back to the workforce. What we're seeing is around the world, women have mostly given up because they just can't cope. And the mental health of women, and then nurses and those that have been at the front of this pandemic have also been tried quite a bit. So I think that's the negative side. The positive side is we're finally realizing, and those that didn't want to see that women did provide all this unpaid care work are now forced to see it.
Great, thank you for that. Cristina.
Yeah, to be very honest, I think the only thing that surprised me was what took so long. I think when we look at the atmosphere and the climate of the workforce, and whether it's globally or even, I have a very local view, of course, being here in the US, but there were definitely signs that this were to come. I think the treatment of employees, especially when we look at women, especially when we look at BIPOC talent, it's always been there, and it's kind of been this bubbling issue that I think has really just come to light. And I think it was surprising to come during a time when you would think people would need to work and needed that paycheck, and it really did demonstrate that there was barely a paycheck there to hold on to. So it really was this understanding of what work and life and balance really meant to people. But it didn't surprise me that it happened. It just surprised me it took so long to occur.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that insight. Okay, Justin.
Great points by both women. To add on to that, I think as we're looking into what we do as contributors to the workplace, it's an opportunity for us to hold our employers accountable. reflecting on the responses from the polls earlier from this group, it's interesting to hear and see who's interested in making moves and who's happy with where they are. And I think whichever group you responded to, there's an opportunity to really make the workplace what we think it could be, what it should be, and what we'd like it to be. So some good things coming out of the Great Resignation and holding our employers accountable.
Thank you for that, Justin. And Femi.
Yeah, I think for me, and kind of coming off of what Cristina and Justin both shared, it's some of the basic questions that organizations are just really starting to ask is what surprised me about the Great Resignation, about things like, maybe we should ask people if they like working here, and if they don't, why they don't like working here. Just basic things that you think companies should have been asking and should have been acting on beforehand. Now they're finally starting to look at, all right, it took us a while to get here, but maybe these are questions we should be asking people. And really, when it comes to women in the workforce, how can we be more innovative about how work is done? A key part of some of the research I did on inclusive leadership was there's just too much of focus on these kind of metrics of you need to be in the office from 9 to 5, and that's how work is done. And how can we be more creative about that? So I like that some of these questions are being asked. And to what you shared, Justin, we need to hold the employers accountable, which I think the Great Resignation is.
Yeah, that's a great insight. And also, I wanted to, mention the fact that we have to think about how do we change policy and really address these issues to key decision makers that would actually promote sustainability and make sure that the gap is not widening, but it's being closed. So Femi, I have a question for you. What recommendations from a workplace corporate standpoint, what recommendations would you make in regards to corporate policy and gender equity or equality?
That's a great question. I think when it comes to and I love that we got the UN perspective on this, and now let's look at corporations. What can we do when it comes to this? First, I think it's helpful to really assess your current state. What is happening when it comes to gender equity in your organization? It's helpful to do some kind of diagnostic to look at, are there funky things happening with pay? Are there funky things happening with promotions? First, look at that. And Dr. Chantal Line, she pointed out earlier, we need to involve the beneficiaries in the solution. So do that diagnostic and also involve the beneficiaries as you're trying to develop the policy. Make sure that you're not over here trying to kind of prescribe what you think will be beneficial for these individuals, which in the end of the day may not be what's the most effective thing to do. So that's the first thing to do, is you're looking to craft policies. And then as you find out what your greatest gaps are, what your greatest opportunities are, that's when you can start to look at policies that we know make a difference. And again, depending on what that diagnostic reveals, there are things like family leave policy that government companies are starting to look at when it comes to, and again, family leave, not just maternal leave, what's happening paternally, how can we be creative about, adoption as well when people do that, and making sure we have these leave policies, because again, that's when we're starting to lose a lot of women leaving the workforce. The other really great policies and programs that can be done, for example, mentorship, sponsorship programs, those have been really shown to help gender equity. And again, those have to be intentional. So involving people as you develop those is really helpful. And then having an intentional approach to recruiting, onboarding, involving women that have left the workforce. That's something that we're really looking at. How can we be creative about how we're bringing people on board, where we're looking for people, and what programs we have in our organization that can really help bringing women into the workforce. And how can we think differently too? How can we look at part-time work differently, job share work differently, how work is done? That's something we're looking at too. And that's, again, helpful policies that can be helpful to people, and making work really flexible. I think focusing on all right, for you to be successful in this job, this is what needs to happen. How you accomplish that, we can be flexible with it. I think having those flexible work policies is really helpful as well. So looking at your organization, looking at your opportunities, and then looking at the policies that would be most effective for kind of closing those gaps is my recommendation in terms of policies.
Great, thank you for that. And to piggyback on that, I would like to ask Justin a question, more in regards to recommendations that you may have that will dissolve the disparity of pay equity and getting women promoted, having that trade-off, like, that binary trade-off. I want to get on the partner track. I want to be in senior leadership, or I want to expand, but then at the same time, I want to raise a family. There's going to be sacrifices. There's a lot of literature on this as far as like getting away from work, going back. I'm going to lose control. I'm going to lose my visibility, etc. What are your thoughts on this?
Thanks, Oscar. I have to preface this and say there's a lot of perspectives when answering this question. However, I would love to share some actionable tips that I think is helpful to all of us. As we think about promotability in the workplace, some of the things from my point of view and the experiences I've had, it's important to honor your own voice, trust your instinct. I think is one of the first hurdles that we often encounter is what should I do, what shouldn't I do, and recognizing that professional growth is a good thing, to advocate for yourself and talk about yourself. Femi actually touched on a couple of things that I think is important. Mentorship programs, sponsorship programs, getting involved in mentorship programs is a great opportunity to highlight the work that you do, what you're capable of, and how you've supported the business. Specifically, thinking about mentoring programs, I actually encourage people to really tap into those relationships with connecting with the executives. And for example, here at our company, we have a mentoring program that enough people don't utilize. So to tap into those programs that are designed to help our people develop, that's really important to jump on that, take that risk. Second thing, normalizing talent review conversations. I come from a perspective of thinking about how my journey got me to where I am today, with parents who are immigrants, not understanding financial literacy, not knowing the basics of economics. Like, reflecting back, I think about, man, I should have gone to business school. I should have pursued a business degree to really have that foundation of knowledge. So for talent review specifically, as you all work on your self-reviews, normalize those conversations with your direct manager, hold your managers accountable. And often I hear, well, my manager canceled my one-on-one. We make our performance reviews a one-time process throughout the year. Take that ownership back into your own hands, manage up, hold your managers accountable, connect with your HR and talent teams, and ask them those questions. What does a career path, specifically a career map look like in this company? How do I get to the next level? What are the competencies that I need to know? And often we think about, when we compare what others are doing, and it's natural, human tendency to do that, but take it back on yourself and hold your managers, your teams, your leadership accountable. I want to understand what I need to do to get to the next milestone. And then lastly, I'll wrap up and say this, is look at the market value as you explore other options, and really looking at the people who responded to looking at other opportunities. Understand your worth and know that that's a good exercise to do and reflect on. So more to share on that, but that's something I wanted to highlight for you all.
No, Justin, thank you. Remarkable, and definitely a great game plan. One that I'm going to definitely, think about over and over again, as far as being having control of our careers and being in that driver's seat, and understanding that we have to own it. Thank you so much. So speaking of game plans, I want to turn over a question over to Cristina. Regards to game plans, and I'm going to read a little bit. In addressing the DEI new game plan, what else remains and has not been addressed yet? Potentially something that we could do to reverse this great resignation and whatever else is going to happen in the future that we don't know of yet.
Yeah, if we have like 5 more hours, I can probably just get the tip of the iceberg out about it. But anyone that has heard, any conversations that I'm a part of when it comes to this DE&I work, I talk about the real work, right? And that's behind the scenes. So when we talk about things that have been unaddressed and kind of not really even recognized, I'm going to tie it into pay equity and the Great Resignation, but It's this quote that I heard earlier today, actually, which is so on brand. And it was, payment isn't biased, right? The payer is, right? These systems are put in place by individuals. Those individuals still work at these companies. So until we address, recognize, and mitigate the bias in the individuals who are making these decisions, until we hold them accountable, we're not going to see change. So whether it's pay, whether it's promotion, whether it's opportunities, mentorship, the bias that's remaining in the system. And I spoke a lot, when I first came into this DE&I role, I spoke a lot about changing the system. We did a full systems review to understand where the bias lived in the system. Now we're at a place of, okay, well, there's individuals who have the power to make these changes. Those individuals, we need to dig into any bias they may have, and we need to ensure that they are working towards the change. When it comes to pay equity, I understand it is a very big task, right? You have to plan for it, you have to budget for it. I get it. It's not an overnight fix, like a lot of things that fall into the DE&I space, but furthermore, any of the issues that we're really addressing when it comes to the Great Resignation. These are not overnight fixes. But what I do feel like is we need to ensure that we are putting plans in place, kind of the low-hanging fruit. We may not be able to bump everyone, everyone who is paid less than, we may not be able to bump up all of their pay overnight, but what are other benefits that we can offer, right? The professional development piece is huge. Learning and development for talent, right? And again, coming from that equitable standpoint and not equality. Everyone doesn't need the same thing to be able to be successful. So really digging in and understanding the needs of the individual groups across the different dimensions of diversity for your employees is going to help you get there. So I think it really is, within the organization, being able to recognize the bias within the individuals that have created the systems will really start to, that's how you fix the organization. That's how you fix the problems that so many people have been vocal about. For so long, companies were actually able to claim ignorance, right, to inequalities because there was no noise. No one was saying anything. You have a new generation who are transparent, who talk to one another, who tell each other what their salary is. And me being that, I think I'm now considered a geriatric millennial. That was still a hush hush thing. You didn't talk about your salary, but those younger millennials and the Gen Z coming in, I'm like, go ahead and share it. Go ahead. I'm proud of you guys because they really are sharing that information with each other and they're creating their own sense of transparency. And that's what we need to continue seeing. If the corporations and the people that have the power to make these decisions aren't being transparent, well, your employees are going to be transparent with one another. So it's a problem that needs to be addressed head on. So I think, again, it's addressing the bias that's just living within the system. It'll really help to be more transparent, to fix the problem and address it head on. You don't have to hide behind it. Your employees already know. That's why they're leaving, right? You don't have to hide behind it, address it, fix it, and move forward. Be transparent about the process. People just want to know what's going on.
Wow, that's a lot. And this is a masterclass. I feel like I just went through a whole entire graduate program in 1 hour. It's like condensed, unbelievable. So I'm gonna, Lillian, should we have one more question? I want to ask Lillian and the viewers here, if there's time for one more question for the panelists. Please stay with us for another 5-10 more minutes. We'll really appreciate that. And so the last question here, and I'll start out in the same order. The question is, what final advice do you have for our audience when it comes to advancing ourselves? And some of you already said this, but just one last piece of nugget, like the take-home advice that you could give us when it comes to, empowering ourselves and really thinking about what we could do for ourselves going forward. So I'll go start with Dr. Chantal Line. Yes.
Chantaline, yes.
Chantaline, como Jacqueline. Sorry, excuse me.
Yeah.
Yes.
I just put in the chat. I was on this panel with a bunch of CEO male, and we were talking about this. And really, because you need a pipeline of women, talented women, and middle management is often male, or sometimes they're female, but they have to have in their job description to identify the good talent in the women in the junior and have a job to nurture them, identify them, and mentor them so that they make it to the senior level if we ever want to make it to parity.
Great, thank you. Cristina, Justin, and then Femi. Cristina?
Repeat the question one more time. I want to make sure I answer properly.
Sure, absolutely. And I'm going to read it just to make sure that everyone's on the same page. So what final advice do you have for our audience on advocating for themselves on the job and or within their organization?
Yep. I'm going to align completely with something that Justin said. It is about managing up. You are in control of your career. Yes, you want your organization to invest in you. Yes, you want to have those resources at your fingertip. But at the end of the day, you must be accountable for your own career path and take advantage of the opportunities that are out there. So manage up. When you discover what you need to move forward, make sure that your manager and your organization is there to support you. If they say you need X, Y, and Z to get to that next promotion, you make them list out everything that they are going to offer you in order to help you on that path forward. But also hold yourself accountable that when they do provide those resources, you take advantage of them and make sure you document everything. Document your path, document your successes, because recency bias is real as well. And you want to make sure that all of the accomplishments and all of the wins, those even the small wins that you have throughout your career, you're able to speak to and really present. So manage up and take control of your career path.
Great.
Cristina, something that you said actually resonated with me, and it was having those conversations with people around your expectations. So for me, I think what I would recommend to the folks here is just, again, normalize those conversations and build a network of knowledgeable people of this process. And they can be mentors within the company. They can be people on this call right now, other participants, the speakers, and just building that community to really inspire you, motivate you, encourage you. I think that's important to have a good support team.
I agree with what's been shared, and double click on all of that. I think, Cristina, I'm with you. What Justin shared about managing up completely resonates, and being proactive. Y'all, we know the system's broken. We know the policies aren't there yet. So you have to be proactive about some of these things and managing up and writing down what's, and looking at what you're after and really be intentional about going after that. Like I said, mentorship program, if there's one, seize onto it. I said intentional mentorship programs because a lot of these mentorship programs are really not great. But at the end of the day, a lot of times the basic foundation of a mentorship program is usually it's giving you visibility and access to people you wouldn't have. So even if the mentorship program is just okay, you can be proactive about taking it to that next level if you're intentional about how you're leveraging that time with people as well. I saw Jenny mention something in the chat about building your personal brand. And that is really important. See what you can be. LinkedIn is my favorite space. So see how you can be intentional about building your brand, things you're excited about, passionate about, thoughts you have. How can you start to build that brand of yours? And again, if your organization doesn't have a mentorship program, see what you can do about finding a mentor in your organization, even outside of your organization. That can be beneficial too for your network. And a trick I have for finding a mentor, because sometimes you ask someone to be your mentor and they're just like, oh my goodness, the commitment and the responsibility of being a mentor. I have a few mentors that don't even know they're my mentor, where I just check in with them every few months and we chat, and it's been like this for a couple years. So if there's somebody who's here that you're interested in, reach out to them, see if they have some good information for you, and see if they're open to a future conversation as well.
Great, that's insightful. And I want to have one more question back to Justin, because I know Justin mentioned that you have a mentorship program in your organization. So what will make me a great mentee? Because it's a two-way street, right? I mean, it's a dynamic. So based on the fact that you have already instilled this mentorship program in your organization, I would love to tap into your wisdom here as far as I need to be a great mentee in order to have a great mentor, vice versa.
Great question. I think it's reflecting on all those questions that you want for yourselves and planting the seed ahead of time with your mentor. And even how Femi shared her own personal experience of who her mentors are, it's actually planting the right seed, understanding the objective of what is helpful to get out of the conversation. Obviously, there's more, beneficial things to come from those conversations, but having specific questions, doing research, looking at what blogs thought leaders, the questions that they're asking. Tons of toolboxes online. Go on Google and search for questions around mentoring relationships. And looking at the chat box, tap into the mentorship program here and looking at all the different resources. I think as we, as mentees, look to our mentors, it's providing the right context. Where do I want to go? What do I want to get out of it? Asking really specific questions around pay. How did they get there in their journey? What were some good tips? Things that they actioned is important. Because to me, sharing this information, it's great, it's helpful, but what actions do we take? And that is an opportunity to focus on or around actions. I hope that helps.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Anyone else in the panel want to have their final words before I turn it over to Dr. Lillian?
Buy from women, support women, lift them up. We all have a role to play.
Noted, yes. Anyone else? Cristina or Femi?
I would just say the same thing. We all have a role to play. So for yourself, see what you can do, see what that first step is for you. Maybe today it's just Googling or checking out your LinkedIn network. And then the environment you're creating, we all have a role to play. So what is that role that you want to play? It doesn't have to be a big thing, but what is that thing you want to commit to starting today that you can start doing this week for yourself and for others?
Yep, and I'm going to go right off of what Femi just said. As you rise, right, like lift others up, right? And a lot of the time, it doesn't have to necessarily be you are all of a sudden in this leadership role. Rise and lift with your peers. Invite people into the room that may not have been invited before, make those connections, make that network, and really, give back and make sure that you really do create a path for others to be able to follow and be intentional and have integrity.